Hello and welcome to the Amargi Mosaic. I'm your host, Elif Sarican. At the Amargi Mosaic, we're piecing together conversations from Kurdistan and the Middle East, bringing you stories and insights you might not hear elsewhere. And today I'm joined by someone who many of you watching probably already know and have known for many, many years, and someone who, I think in this conversation will both be a bit of a break from the usual geopolitics and kind of conflict conversations, but actually, again, many of you may know that her story also has that integrated in it as well. So I'm joined by the one and only Dashni Morad. Thank you for joining me today, Dashni.
Thank you so much, Elif. I'm so excited to join this conversation with you. And yeah, I've been keeping an eye on your conversations.
Thank you so much. So you're a singer, songwriter, television producer, and also a activist who's built an extraordinary career across multiple worlds. Some have called you, and I think we will talk a bit about, the comparison to Western figures a little bit later, but some have also called you the Shakira of Kurdistan.
Once the hand.
I
Once
think
the
people
hand.
should be I think people should be calling others the Dashni of, wherever
Ah,
else.
yeah.
So
Thank you so much.
the first question I wanted to ask you, and this is something that came up when we've spoken before and had, chats before,
Yeah.
is we create and imagine, we make worlds possible, which I do want to talk a little bit about in its own right in a bit. But as an artist who's reaching a certain age in an
Mhm.
industry that's particularly harsh on women as they get older, or as we discussed before, the harshness kind of starts to shift and starts to transform. How have you been experiencing this? What does this mean to continue to work and create in a context where you're told that you possibly might be too old?
I think that it comes as a shock, no matter how much I know of all the challenges and adversity as women in music and media face in this region. But until it doesn't happen to you, you still think, oh, yeah, something like that exists. To me, I think the shock is because people know who I am, what I stand for. I literally gave up my whole musical career when I was only 29 years old. And I completely went into refugee camps, and we had 5 libraries. I was there every day running it, and we had specific programs to help children. That was during the invasion of Mosul, and to make sure that they would be able to deal with their traumas. And then we did so much, like building this. It wasn't just building a career as an activist, but I stood my ground and I did such meaningful and impactful projects on gender-based violence with the Canadian government, with the Dutch government, with the German government, on climate education. I've been doing this for like a decade, and when I thought I know who I am as a woman. I know my culture. I know my people. I know our sounds, and I know who I am. And I find myself. This is the time where I feel good to make music, because to me, music is such a powerful tool. It has so much impact on anything you can imagine, and you have such a strong voice to use, especially in moments of need, which I have done so in the past. But then I noticed there's this backlash of, oh, women your age are raising 5 kids. What are you doing? Go home and marry and have 5 kids. So it made me realize we have so many women who are seasoned, who are now at their prime, but we're kind of muted, because when you engage in conversations like this, or in you're having a cup of tea with friends or at work, and you as a woman come up with your suggestions or ideas, because you're so muted, you also no longer feed it. And I think this is such a waste, because it takes so much time for our women at this age to come with all these beautiful input and ideas. that just I see so many women my age, they're just so fearless, and that brings projects that are innovative, that brings so many good to the society. And it's sad that because of age we cannot contribute, and that's a thing that to me is a shock.
Yeah, and as you've said before, the kind of difference between not being seen as yet almost knowing enough to be able to contribute until a certain age, and then after a
Yeah,
certain age that you shouldn't be. So it's almost the kind of environment that is created is almost a lose-lose situation.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, what I wanted to ask was, we're actually doing this interview where where you have, a very tiny window where you're doing obviously a lot. You have, entire teams kind of like scheduled and waiting, and therefore you still are continuing your creative work, your music. You still, of course, care about and are involved at times in various forms of activism. And I think all of that comes together and it's seen also in, as in the activism comes through your music and your music comes through your activism as well. I think
Yeah,
for anyone who sees that or watches that, it's very clear. What I wanted to ask, and if we, I guess if we do a little bit of dreaming, what
right.
Kurdistan do you want to create through your music, your activism, your presence, and what kind of worlds are you imagining now, especially as the kind of pressures that you face are changing? What kind of world do you wish that it would create?
That's such a beautiful question, and I think I would need all day and all night to answer this question. But as an elevator pitch, I would say we have so much to offer culturally and historically, and it's I don't think we need more than we have, but we need to see all the various talents, and we should stop fearing one another. I feel like when war comes to an area, to a region, there's so much mistrust that happens, and people, it takes so much time for people to trust one another again. And I think we have all the necessary creativity and innovations and people who are thinkers and challenge minds, and it's all here. What I would love to see is more equality, where it's more inclusive, and where I can see women of all ages thrive, and where everywhere, like from the workplace to going to the bazaar, that can be a safe space for women to exist and for their ideas to be welcomed. I think the moment we truly embrace this, not by ticking a box as an NGO or as governmental entities, like, oh yeah, we have some projects who are embracing these women and their projects, but it should be everyone based on their um, talent and hard work, and how it has input to a certain area, like it's on my city, Soleimani, or is it Erbil or Duhok, or the whole region here in Kurdistan. Um, I would just love to see more embracement of more of our women, and I think that will be more than enough for us to thrive and to become truly us, which is, to me, Kurdistan is Shirin. It's very sweet. It's a sweet place. We have our food, our colorful attire, and our wildlife and nature, and this change of seasons and the mentality. Everything is just so Shirin from Nodos. And so we don't lack anything. There is depth there, it's rich, and all that we need to do is to let go of fear and mistrust, and kind of let everyone be in their space, and we'll have that world, which is Kurdistani Shirin.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of my life, something that I've noticed is and I suppose as someone who grew up in Europe as well, is a
Yeah.
really difficult balance that particularly a lot of women think about, which is the loneliness a lot of women face in kind of, I guess, what we can call, for the sake of this argument, like hyper collective societies like Kurdish society,
Hmm.
trying to strike the balance between that, but also not wanting to lose ourselves in the hyper individualism of, many European societies, or what many would probably call Western societies. As someone who also has lived between Kurdistan and Europe, how have you navigated this? And do you think there is a way that Kurdish women can find a way to honor our communities whilst also being ourselves? And what happens when being ourselves means challenging some of these entrenched kind of like customs and so-called traditions?
That's beautiful put again. I've faced that myself, that isolation and loneliness for the past decade, and it made me kind of push back. I'm more like on myself, and it's just so hard to connect as before because of what you go through and be misunderstood or you're challenged all the time. Um, I think there's a way to embrace our culture all the while standing up for our rights as women and for our voices, no matter our age, to be heard. But the moment a woman becomes an activist in this region, the moment we understand the core of feminism, which to me is to be able to make the choices for yourself, has nothing to do with that I'm opposing my culture. And I've seen more women who are understanding their rights and more to promote our culture, from putting symbolic Kurdish prints in on their product that they're selling, for example. The moment women stand up, it's when they are so traumatized and just angry and sad and been through so much that they reach a peak, a place where they're just like a volcano. It just erupts. It's just like, I'm here and I need to say something, and so I want to stand up for what is right. But then the uh, reaction to it, you get a part where praises you and you're a hero, you're amazing, but then your human self is taken away from it. Which means you can't have a moment for you. You always have to be on and switched on as an activist. You have to be there for everyone. You're like this unappreciated mother all the time. And the moment you don't speak up for something, you're a default activist. And so it doesn't give space for you to find a moment to recollect, to heal, to rest, and find ways to join tables of reconciliation where you can join with your powerful voice and actually have your experience, input, and power of your voice and the people that's with you to put in those tables. Because I have joined such tables, whether it was with at the United States Peace Institute. I forgot that it was in Washington, or with UN, or with local government. I've joined many big tables, but you're so exhausted, so you back out more.
Mm,
And
mm.
what we miss here is the connection with the women from different spheres, and between us and NGO and governments and the international community. There is, like, us women are there in that circle, but it's so controlled that, to me, it just, when I don't see impact, I don't feel hopeful to be in it anymore. So I would love to see more networking and bringing women from all of Kurdistan together, no matter what their political preferences, and to get rid of that fear and to actually bring them back to that network. And maybe that can get that isolation away, that loneliness away, and be a part of our society, all the while disrupting, making noise, and creating that rip that it's needed.
Yeah, and I guess that coming together also already could think, the way, I mean, and in many ways it's happening spontaneously and also in many contexts, right? But to do it in a bit more of a concerted way. I think that's also related to something else I wanted to talk to you about, which is you've spoken about how, and we spoke about this last time we spoke as well, is how the media objectifies women.
Oh
And,
yeah.
this is something that, is as old as is the, the trick is as old as the how, is as media. And, from the beginning of media in many ways, women's bodies have been used, objectified, and, and again, as you said, in many ways to distract from a lot of things. And I think
Mm.
particularly in the context of the way sometimes Kurdish women have been reported in, particularly in Western media, it seems that it's also been used as a way to distract from some of the politics, like how, for example, YPG, so like the women's defense units in Rojava fighters were portrayed in media to probably avoid discussing Rojava's actual political project. There was women fighters in Western media and saying like, this fighter looks like Angelina Jolie and so on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, as someone who's been in the public eye for many years now and also faced being labeled as, a quote unquote angry feminist, how have you navigated the media? How have you navigated the media in a way where, perhaps it's important still to have that voice out there, but try to find ways around not being objectified and there being some meaning to how you engage with the media.
I try to engage in conversations, which I did like during girl talk shows, and I would say something like this guest before me was talking about women as if it's like buying one, two, three objects. And let me just remind him, when Kurdish women were ruling, he wasn't even born. And so like I had many moments where I would, any platform I could find to address the whole objectification of women. And you get the moment, the people are with you, but you're after that muted and blocked and silenced and ghosted from
Yeah.
these stations. And so I faced many forms like that, also on Twitter. That's why I left Twitter. I had like, my Twitter was so powerful, and like the impression, it would be over 10 million views. And it was just, um, I think that there's more fear of a woman's voice than a man's voice. Everyone welcomes a powerful man here who has businesses and cars and lands and anything, and can still be on TV and look dashy and all of that. And but when a woman who has almost nothing but can speak her truth, we're so afraid of that. We're not used to women having much, especially voice wise. We're still not accepting of it. I think we know of them, and I'm so proud of our place of how women have come forward
Mm.
everywhere, but we're still not used to it, or I think we're not still accepting it. So because of that, the objectification of women on in media, it continues. Like, it's in the way the news is told, the way gym is covered. Like, for example, they go and cover a report about a new gym being open, the way the camera angle shows the woman, and the kind of music used, the way the reporter reports, and um, any TV channels you open, it's always about what a woman should wear, how she should talk, what she shouldn't eat because she otherwise she can't be reproductive, be healthy. Like, she can't have children. So it's always about our body on TV.
Mm.
And it's always like, I saw yesterday there's a film festival and there's this guy I randomly saw, and I immediately scrolled away, and he was saying, well, my short movie is about this woman who's covered, and we want to show that covered women also are productive and doing good work, and not just the other woman. Like, literally, this was what he was saying in the interview, and I was like, you should be highlighting what we've achieved in the past 2 decades. It was impossible what we've been able to achieve. It costed so many blood of our sisters, and it continues. Like, we're so focused on a few girls who are models, like, oh, the girls and their G wagons. And so this takes away from highlighting, celebrating an author, a writer, or a filmmaker, any kind of great woman. So we are so designed and taught into um, just scoop and see which person is bad as a model or as a singer or as someone, and let's just put a lens on this.
Mm.
And but we're just not seeing all the greatness of our women. It's happening, but on a very small scale. So for me, I think to find a way to stop this objectifying our women truly starts with giving proper training to our media.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And obviously you've experienced and faced many of these elements. So I think it only makes sense that what you have to say is really taken on board. And as also someone who you were in the limelight from the age of 19, right? And what struck me when we last spoke was, you know, I obviously didn't know, and I think many people don't know the incredible struggle that came with that behind that 19-year-old who was, on stages and in the limelight. And, I remember when you said you were you were at school, you were working in a jewelry shop to essentially fund your own performances and taking, either cheap trains or buses to perform in like very random villages in like Germany, for example, while also facing constant judgment and what sounds like outright rudeness. And you said you felt like there was no support system for a young woman who was developing their kind of craft and their art in performing in becoming a what obviously now is a very, very well known artist. When you face all that, I want to know what kept that fire burning in you? Like, why did you continue? And what does it mean to be a Kurdish woman artist having built everything from literally from scratch and with what you've called, and again, this struck me as well when you said this, the shame of being a woman. So you did all of this while constantly facing essentially the shame of being a woman. Yeah, what kept that fire burning, Dashni?
I just think it was just the passion for music. I love music so much. Like, I can be in a studio in my pajamas for a week, and all I need is just water and my tea, and I'm fine. I Because it's such a way to express myself. I am free. I am not labeled. I am not ashamed. And from our time in 2005, anything I was doing, especially dancing and moving and making music, was such a shame. And it made even headlines all around the world, even BBC. And you had this mullah like looking at my video, and he's like saying, "I want everyone to not look at her music." Um, I love making music. I think any woman or girl who enters a specific sphere in society, in our I'm saying Kurdistan, we don't have the intention of breaking things or the intention of we're against you. On the contrary, we come in with good intention of making our society richer and enjoying what we do and share it with people. And the moment we women and girls make money goes back to our families, starting with me. And the moment we have a platform, I was 24 when I set up an NGO and I started renovating schools instead of so many of my male friends, any penny they made here, they brought it to Europe and built businesses in Europe with that money. They took out their money. I spent my money in Kurdistan. So what kept me going is my passion for music, but also as women, the moment we are active in society, we care. We're here because we care. We want to do something good. We want to constantly find ways how we can nourish businesses, music, film, schools, anywhere we are at, we wish to nourish it. And I think that has definitely been my fire.
Wow, I mean, I think firstly that sounds incredible, but also I imagine that particularly a lot of women who are hearing this and like women creatives will really, really relate to this. What I want to, I mean, it's obviously been so amazing talking to you, and I feel like we could talk for, we
Yeah.
could talk for hours and hours, and we have, and I'm sure we will. What I wanted to ask you, I guess, finally, is at Dashni Morad as from a child refugee of war to making music that has been listened all around the world to building NGOs to trying to contribute as much as you can to Kurdistan. What is next for you? And yeah, what is next for you? What do you want to do?
I would love to live on a farm. That would be a dream come true. But right now I'm working on so much music. I have a new song coming out, which is about not giving up, and it's for everyone. Because again, I'm not against. I'm a part of our society, and so this next song is truly for anyone who feels hopeless. And I hope through this song to show that no matter your struggle, you'll get over it, and you'll be fine. I'm with you. We're with you. Just uh, don't shut yourself out. Don't just talk, speak to me, or speak to someone you love. I think that's what the whole song is. And next, I would love to explore more Kurdish music from different parts. I'm so interested in discovering music from Rojava and Rojava and Bakur, and I'm interested in how these melodic different kind of lyrics, and especially the traditional one, how can I mix this with the pop music I'm doing,
Mm.
and with Sorani music. I'm so interested in this next chapter of traveling to other parts of Kurdistan.
Wow. Well, I'm sure I can speak for everyone when I say that we can't wait to hear what you produce and
Thank
what you
you.
make. Thank you so much for this conversation, Deshni, and thank you so much for joining me in what I know is a really, really busy schedule that you have there. So thank you so much.
It was an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for this rich conversation. It was an opportunity to kind of talk without being asked about why aren't you married or just silly questions. I think I'm so grateful with where I am, and there are also a lot of people who help you. So, to any woman or girl who wish to enter the creative space, there are also a lot of amazing people in all parts who can help you. But yeah, like I'm always grateful um, for such an opportunity where I can just speak my truth. Thank you, Elif.
Thank you so much, Deshni. And that's it for today's episode of the Amargi Mosaic. Until next time, take care, everyone.